Hello everyone, my name is Alex, and this is Zombie Side Up, where whatever pops into my tiny cranium is sculpted into what I hope to be a mediocre at best work of art. Recently I've been craving some cereal, however I lack the culinary skill to make it with food, so instead I'm going to be crafting it with the only thing I know how to use, which is polymer clay. The first thing I'm going to do is make a metal wire armature. This is because at the center of every piece of cereal is a metal wire armature covered in foil. Because of this, the first thing I'm going to need is some metal wire, followed by a pair of pliers, and lastly, a cutting mat. Once I have cut out all the pieces for Barry's armature, I'm then going to use tape to stick them together and use some super glue and thinner wire to hold its shape. Once that's all done, I can begin covering it in aluminum foil and then prepare to start the inclaying process. If you're wondering who Barry is, that is what I have named my sculpture. From now on, henceforth, hereby will, the Cinnamon Toast Crunch character will be called Barry. Now once I have all of the clay out of the wrapping, I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces so that hopefully I can condition it to be a softer, more workable material. This takes a lot of time, but I found that if you squish it really hard with your hands, it turns into a ball that is definitely a lot more conditioned than it was previously. So then I can rip off pieces and start my sculpting. The first thing I'm going to sculpt is the texture tool. Here you can see me pulling out all of my ball styluses that are small enough to add the right texture, and then I'm going to try and do 2 at a time. That's not going to work. Here I tried it though, and eventually I had enough holes on here to make the Cinnamon Toast Crunch texture tool. Once my texture tool is done, I can then get out some clay to start working on the sculpture. Now for this sculpture, I'm going to start with the legs so that I can cook them and have something to hold on to while doing the rest of the sculpture. I cannot tell you how many times I have sculpted something on a sculpture for hours and hours, adding detail and all the different structures just to squish it in 30 seconds because I did not think it was a good idea to cook it. I've now realized that I save a lot more time just cooking it and not having to redo it throughout the whole rest of the process. To me, if I can save time on something, I definitely want to do it, so that's what I did here. Once I bulked out the main structure of the legs, I then added on texture, and it was time to work on the rest of the body. Once the legs are cooked, I can then add on a thin layer of bacon bond throughout the whole body. This is because clay does not stick as good to foil and tape as it does to the other clay, so adding on bacon bond will allow the clay to adhere and not start to fall off later on in the process. This makes it easier to add details, which is really important when you're making a sculpture. Once the body is all covered in clay, I'm then going to add on the eyes. The eyes take the form of a ball of clay that is cooked, cut in half, and then put right onto the spots where the eyes are. Now, I do not need the whole ball of clay, as only half of the eye is showing at any time. If you are making a sculpture where more of the eye is showing, you might just want to use the whole ball of clay, but in this case, this worked for me. Now once it's pushed into place, I'm then going to add in all the details around the eye, which include a snake of clay around each eye, an eyebrow ridge that is fairly large above the eye, and then I'm going to work on some more details. Once I am done detailing the eyes, I'm going to add a snake of clay around the mouth, which will end up being the lips later on, and afterwards it's time to add more detail. Now once that's all done, I'm going to smooth out the inside of the mouth with a ball stylus to make it look a little bit more mouthy, and then afterwards I'm going to be able to add the hole in the back for the throat, and then I'm going to add in some gums. Now the gums are important because without them, I will not be able to push the teeth into the mouth, as the foil is right underneath a very thin layer of clay. So the gums allow me to have a thick enough layer of clay to hold the teeth. Here you see me making the tongue, which is a bendy piece of clay that is put on a wire and then sculpted. I'm going to cook this before I put it in, so in case I bumped into it, it will not break. Now I'm adding on that aforementioned texture to the lips, and afterwards, it's time to make some teeth. Once I have opened up the bag of translucent cause clay, I can then condition it for about 30 minutes, push it into my hands, and then I'll have a piece that's ready to be used. I'm going to pinch out a tooth-like shape, cut it off from the bigger piece of clay, and then once I have enough of those, I'm going to put them all on a tray, cook them, and then put them in the mouth. The next thing I'm going to do is add the tongue into place, which I'm going to do before I add in the rest of the teeth. I am then going to add all the teeth in off camera, and afterwards I'm going to texture the whole sculpture. Once that is all done, I am then going to cook the sculpture so I can start working on the arms. I want to do this because I want to be able to hold on to the sculpture without squishing all of the details. Once I have all the wires bent into shape, I'm then going to push on a noodle of clay, blend it into the sculpture. I'm then going to add on some muscles. Now once the muscles are added on, blended in, and the elbow is added on, I can then start working on the hand. For the hand, I'm going to shape it beforehand, then cut 4 equal-sized fingers into it. Once those are all smoothed into finger-looking shapes, I'm going to add in the details. Now for the details, I'm just going to add on fingernails with the silicone shaper, and afterwards I'm going to add in all the crease lines that come on every hand. Once the hand is all detailed, I'm going to push it into place. I'm then going to add a thumb, and I'm going to blend it all into the arm. I'm also going to texture it, re-angle the hands to make them look a little bit more menacing, and it's time to see what else I've made. Here you can see I made another piece of Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal that has come alive. I made this one look like it is fearful for its life, as in front of it is the giant evil berry. I also made some other pieces of Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal that have not grown big enough to grow eyes and a mouth. However, these are just going to be floating around these two as they do their epic battle. Now, with all the sculpting done, it is time to move on to the painting. I have a problem. While I do excel at sculpting, my painting skills have not reached the par yet. However, I did have an idea. I have used this before in the avocado video, but I remembered I have a piece of cereal, and I can use this as an example. So I'm just going to put this in the background and hope I remember to look at it while I'm trying to remember what colors to use. Anyways, I'm going to start giving all the Cinnamon Toast Crunch pieces a base coat of a nice peach color, and afterwards I can begin to add on the wash. For this wash, I watered down some milk chocolate colored paint and let it soak into the crevices, so when I dabbed it away there was some left. However, I realized after dabbing away, that did not work. So instead I let it sit on the sculpture for about 5 minutes before dabbing away, as some would dry onto the sculpture. This worked like a charm, and afterwards it was time to move on to the mouth. Now for the mouth, I used a mixture of reds, pinks, terracottas, and purples, and this gave a very mouthy look to the mouth. Once the mouth was fully dried, I took all the teeth, put super glue on the bottom of them, and pushed them into place. I took a lot of time on this, as I wanted the teeth to line up exactly how they were previously. I think it ended up looking really good, and once that was all done, I could then add on a wash to all the teeth. For this wash, I just made a yellow brownie wash, put some water in it, and put it all over the teeth. This yellowed them to look a little bit more used and definitely not taken care of, and afterwards it was time to work on the eyes. For the eyes, I added on a black layer to start off. I then added on a brown layer to make the eyes have some color, and then I ended off the eyes with a black dot. This last black dot is what gives the eyes direction, so it's very important that you angle the black dot to be looking at what you want it to be looking at. Now I get to do my favorite part of every video, which is adding in all the glossy, mouthy bits to the mouth. This makes the mouth look like it has saliva, it makes it look shiny, and it makes it look a little bit more realistic. I also get to use Fabri-Tac for the first time, which makes the mouth have a lot of drool spread out throughout the whole mouth. This adds another layer, which makes it look even better. The next thing I'm going to do is add on a thin layer of UV resin to all the eyes, and I'm going to cure that with a UV light. Afterwards, I'm going to color the stand. I'm going to put white on the top, and I'm also going to put black on the sides. After all of that is done, it's time for one of the easier steps, which is assembly. To do this, I'm going to put super glue on all the wires, and then push all the pieces into place. After everything is assembled on the stand, it is then time to pour the resin. But before I can pour any resin, I need to cut out some pieces of acrylic. I am then going to take all the acrylic pieces. I'm going to tape 3 together. And once I put those on the stand, I'm then going to push the last one into place. As you can see here, I did end up needing to cut a hole out of this piece of acrylic so that a piece of Cinnamon Toast Crunch could peek through. To make sure no resin leaked out, I used about 20 sticks of hot glue to put around all the edges and corners. This is really important to spend time on that step, because if the resin leaks, the whole project is ruined. Anyways, it's time to pour resin. After mixing both parts together, it was then time to add in some dye. I added about 50 drops over a span of 10 minutes, doing it in different parts until it got to the color I was looking for. It ended up being so opaque I did not notice any of the bubbles in the resin, which meant I did not have to do anything to get rid of the bubbles. This is good because I do not own a pressure pot. Anyways, once it was all mixed together, it was then time to pour it onto the stand. I poured it on until it got to a level I was happy with, and then I left it to cure for 48 hours. Afterwards, it was time to demold. For demolding, all I had to do was take a pair of pliers and pull out the acrylic sheets until they just popped off. This ended up breaking a lot of the acrylic sheets, so next time I'll have to make new ones. However, that is okay because I have more acrylic. Anyways, for taking the hot glue off, I just had to pull at it until it decided to come off. For a little bit I was scared it might not, but eventually it did. However, once I was done taking the acrylic off, I repainted the sides, trimmed all the resin that creeped up the edges, and with that, it was time to move on to those crisp final shots.